All right, folks, it's just gone 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Welcome, kia ora, everybody. I'm Eric de Boer from the Buller District Council. So as the live feed has started, beaming out there to everybody that's watching remotely, we may as well crack into it. So this evening's community meeting is on the proposed Zone 1 waste changes and how solid waste is proposed to be managed in Buller going forwards. Tonight's session will look to provide some information on the proposed new waste management system for Zone 1 properties that are in that Buller catchment. And tonight here present is myself, manager of the infrastructure delivery team, our Mayor Jamie Cleine, our solid waste coordinator Juliana Ruiz, and also just recognising some other senior leaders from our team, including our new interim CEO Stephen Giblin, who's just started on Monday. So I'll just hand it over to Jamie to do some scene setting, and then I'll conclude with some slides that will then lead into a Q&A answer session. Before I do so, just quickly some housekeeping. So first and foremost, the emergency protocols for this building is should you hear an alarm or a siren, a fire siren, we just come down, and the exits out of this auditorium are the ones here at the base, the one you came in on, and this one, and at the rear out of the auditorium, and then down into the foyer. The assembly muster point is just out front of the foyer, in front of the NBS Theatre, on the back of the Carnegie building, which is the yellow building you see in the car park. Information. This meeting really is about sharing information about the consultation and what it all involves. It's an opportunity for the community to talk to us about anything that isn't clear or share any concerns towards the end in our Q&A. And we know that there might be mixed views, and we ask you to just work with us and get through the slides, and then we'll get towards the end, and we'd love to engage with you. But at the end of the day, it's your voice and your opinion that really matters to council within this consultation process. So, please make yourself be heard through all the consultation channels that are available to you. You will notice that this was live streamed, and you may see some cameras in the room. So towards the end of the Q&A, I may take a moment to just explain how we can go through that so that the people that are watching online can get the most value out of the questions that you may want to ask and the answers that we provide. So without further ado, I might quickly hand it over to our Mayor.
Thanks very much, Eric, and thanks for coming out. Just before we get into it, I've got a few councillors here tonight, so I'll just quickly whip around. Councillor Annalise, beg your pardon, Annalise Fallett up the back. I want to give a wave out. Councillors, Councillor Joe Howard, Councillor Tony O'Keefe from Northern Buller, Councillor Colin Reedy, one of the Westport ones. Anyone else that I missed? Nope. So again, myself and councillors are all here and available tonight or in the coming week or so to take any questions, answer questions, or hear your feedback on the proposal. So I'll just quickly run through it as a consultation, and so none of this is decided. We're seeking feedback, and council will have that collated at the end of the feedback period on the 4th of September, and we will in due course consider all the feedback and decide what proposal goes forward. The change is about Eric will take you through all the changes shortly, but it's all just about Zone 1 rubbish collection. So that's everyone who's currently picked up with a recycling bin or the rubbish bags, and changes that we're proposing to those. As you know, or you'll hear shortly from Eric and Juliana and the team. There's going to be quite a bit of information, so I just ask you to give them the opportunity to present that, and then we'll take your questions at the end. There's also opportunities, as I mentioned, to reach out to councillors. I have my Mayor's Chats at the Chambers every week. I'm in Reefton as well once a month. And so we genuinely do need to hear this feedback, and we can alter or consider that as what proposal ends up going forward. So other than that, thank you, and we'll hear from the team. Cheers. Thanks, Eric.
Well, indeed. Thank you, Jamie. Much appreciated. So what are the changes and why are they being proposed? So the proposed changes involve the change to the level of service standard for kerbside collection and that waste collection zone number 1. And primarily they are switching from 60-litre bags to 120-litre bins and altering the collection frequency from weekly to fortnightly. And also looking to change how households will pay for their refuse and rubbish collection and move through to rates rather than the pay-as-you-go bags that we've currently have and had for some time. So why make changes in Zone 1 and what is Zone 1? So the curbside collection vehicle routing in Zone 1 is effectively all of Westport, Carter's Beach, the Reefton urban areas, and the State Highway 67 leading north through to Seddonville and Mokanui, 67A heading out towards Cape Foulwind, south along the Coast Road through to Punakaiki, and out the gorge through to Inangahua and Blacks Point, bypassing Reefton on the way to Ikamatua. So Zone 1 is by far and away our largest recycling and rubbish zone in the Buller district. So therefore it's also the biggest opportunity to make meaningful change on the way that we manage our waste. And we've heard over the years from people in the community that people wanted to move away from bags, and we're responding to that. We are obviously very reticent of the future and the changes, particularly legislative changes that are on our forefront, and we're very, very mindful of that and looking at the wider big picture. So why look at doing this now? As I mentioned, this change comes at a time where there's a focus nationally on improving waste management services right across New Zealand that are focusing in on waste and how New Zealand creates it, and increasing recycling, compost, reduce, reuse, recycle. The wider waste initiatives and how waste is managed across New Zealand continues to be within a sector reform that is led by government. And looking at doing this now because it also brings Buller in line with best practice around the nation and in other places around New Zealand, both councils, city councils and wider regional approaches. In terms of timing, the current contract for waste minimisation and management services is Buller is coming to an end and it's coming up for renewal and re-tender. And there's wider opportunities to work on cracking the waste management challenge in remote places like Buller and the West Coast by looking across and working with others potentially going into our future. So therefore, it's just broadly a good time for council to be looking at the way to get things done and to think about working with others and looking across the nation to see what other councils have done to improve waste services across, across our region. So why change things? There are some primary drivers. One of the primary changes moving from bags to bins across New Zealand has been a change for health and safety reasons. Bins are better suitable to collection plant, trucks and equipment than what plastic bags are. Also, there's Ministry for Environment initiatives, and there's future forecast changes coming into the waste sector. Making a reliable and consistent collection service available for all of our residents also does combat and go against ongoing illegal dumping. We know that ongoing illegal dumping in remote places off the coast continue to be a problem. And council can invest on behalf of the communities to capture more material for recycling and recovery. Effectively, a universal household collection service can help manage costs for each household on that collection service. So what are the details of the proposed? One moment, pardon me. How the current system works. So I just really want to quickly browse over this just to give you an understanding of our current region and our solid waste refuse collection. So we're divided in 3 zones. Broadly speaking, Zone 1 is by far and away our largest zone. It has recycling bins collected fortnightly, and the refuse is managed by rubbish bags at $9.10 inclusive GST each that are currently collected right across that network weekly. Zone 2 is effectively Karamea, so everything north of the Mokanui River Bridge, which in effect really is Little Wanganui North, and that is managed via a landfill with its own Karamea Resource Recovery Centre and disposal facility. Zone 3 is inland, and it just services the very small community of Maruia and Springs Junction and immediate surrounds, and is also still serviced by a landfill and recycling facility. Local landfills and transfer stations here within Zone 1, so think Reefton and Westport, are owned by council, and they're currently managed and contracted by different operators. So what would changes look like? As the proposal document speaks to, primarily this proposal is around a shift from the 60-litre rubbish bags to having the 120-litre bins provided by council, and moving to seeing the rubbish and the recycling collection as part of rates, noting that recycling collection is already currently part of rates and has been for a considerable period of time. So changing from weekly to fortnightly collection right across the routing network, and essentially paying for that rubbish and collection through the rates rather than buying individual rubbish bags. Council recognises that these proposed changes are significant change of service level, and so hence the current consultation process where Council really would value your feedback and the engagement processes we're doing all over the district at the moment. So let's talk a little bit about cost. What are the cost implications for Zone 1? So currently people pay for kerbside recycling, which is $178 inclusive GST per annum. That's for their recycling bin and their glass crate, and they pay for their rubbish bags as they go at $9.10 a bag. So one rubbish bag per week, $473 a year, plus recycling fee of $178, making approximately $600. For one bag a fortnight, $236 a year, plus the recycling fee being around that $400 per annum. Correction, did I say per fortnight earlier? I mean per annum. And under the proposed changes, the estimated total cost are likely to be somewhere between $375 and $450 per annum per rates. Now you'll note the asterisk there. The final cost will need to be determined via a tender agreement to provide the service, and that is something that is set for after this consultation and decision by council. Some procurement and tendering will happen, and those prices will then be again discussed with the community through long-term planning, engagement and consultation processes. Now, at this point, it's probably worth to say that council has absolutely received the feedback that not everybody produces the same amount of refuse. And so everybody is different in their refuse generation, and we've heard large scales of the spectrum as to how people are getting by with just a few bags or many bags. So what are the benefits of making these changes? Well, certainly there's the reduce of the environmental impact of plastic bags and landfill. People have requested and talked with council about rubbish bins and moving with New Zealand and other councils around the country that have moved across to bins. Certainly with making the capacity available to people and a reliable, consistent service across Zone 1, there's real potential to reduce fly tipping and dumping. Health and safety for our contractors as we go out to tender. Bins will have a more attractive proposition for tendering and cost for machinery and contractors. Naturally, there's the reduced risk of animal attacks on bags, so that's wekas in remote locations tearing bags open. Could also be cats and other vermin. And bins are generally tidier. They result in less spillage and breakage as they get picked up by our contractors down our street. Continued, the benefits of making these changes. It certainly goes a long way in encouraging recycling efforts and composting, particularly around recycling efforts, where the learnings around New Zealand has been to provide a consistent and available service around refuse to your residents will drive down the contamination rates within your recycling service. So that stands to reason. If people have an appropriate place to get rid of their soft plastics, that could be the plastics that wrapped around their meat trays, all of that sort of stuff, it removes the temptation to try and put that in the recycling bin to minimise the bag purchase. And that's certainly something we've seen in the Buller. So many of you will have noted that in the last 2 summers, the team took a real effort in doing bin audits on our recycling program, and that was all around the green, yellow and red bin approach, and that was certainly to drive down our contamination rate. We were up to near 30% contamination rate in our recycling collection, kerbside, and we only managed to get that down into the low 20s. To put that into context, New Zealand average is around 16-17% recycling contamination when there's a full suite of bins available for residents to utilise. As I said earlier, it brings Buller into line with national best practice, and it also goes some way to reduce our carbon emissions. The current collection routing done weekly for bag collection obviously comes with lane kilometres run, truck kilometres and a carbon emission component. It's important to note that more people in Zone 1 can opt in. There are those on secondary roads that may choose to opt in, and we would certainly be looking to make the availability for that. So what is mandatory and what does this apply to? It's something we heard a lot in the community feedback to date. So effectively it means that bins would be provided and the new charge would automatically be added to the rates bill for those households that are serviced on the curbside collection route. So properties that currently receive a curbside collection, i.e. a yellow bin and a glass crate, would be opting in. It's essentially a universal service for all our residents shared across the entire Zone 1. As I said before, more properties can choose to opt in, but they will need to take their bin to the nearest collection route. If in effect, it's universal, so everyone gets given the service and therefore they'll collectively contribute. So benefits, switching from weekly curbside collection to fortnightly, we'll be able to reduce the number of truck movements, thereby saving on emissions and fuel. The Buller environment will benefit from a reduction in fly tipping. And we hope there'll be a reduction in fewer plastic bags in circulation. And that move from bags to wheelie bins will prevent animals and stuff getting into the bags and spreading waste litter. Generally, the final point there is that the waste collection sector is generally moving away from the use of bags to collect for rubbish, health and safety and other reasons. So when I look across New Zealand and we talk with peer councils, many have made the recent shift across. Waimakariri, Selwyn, large parts of the North Island, Christchurch, Dunedin has recently gone across, and I'm reliably informed that even our capital is looking at commencing this conversation with their community very, very soon. So the last couple of slides here, just wanted to talk about illegal dumping and recycling efforts. Touched on these earlier, but it does remain a widespread issue within the Buller, and it's all about people having the appropriate mechanisms and means available for appropriate refuse disposal, and without it, and remote communities and remote places, it does tend to equal 2 and 2 plus 4 means that there's some illegal dumping going on. So service, a consistent service provided across all households is anticipated to reduce this, and limiting the space of the bins by 120 litres does provide some incentive for people to recycle more efficiently and actually compost food and garden waste. Currently, it could be noted that there is no cap on what people can present to the curbside. They could put out as many bins as they'd like, as many bags as they'd like. So without further ado, I might just bring it to the any questions slide. I know there will be some people within our audience that are pretty keen to have a chat with us about what this may mean for you. To that end, I have my colleague Mira, who's just making her way up the steps. Now, she has a microphone that she can share around. And so perhaps I may be able to answer. Maybe one of my colleagues or one of the governance members will be able to answer. They can talk a little bit about the next steps in the governance decision making, particularly the workshop queued up for October of this year. And others we might be able to break out and actually take it offline into some further information.
Hi, Eric. I have a question around what if my household creates more rubbish than the 120 litres per fortnight? How would I dispose of that?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I would really encourage you to reduce, reuse, recycle. But listen, we absolutely understand that some people produce more than that. And the usual processes of the refuse transfer station, so that's our RTS in Westport and Reefton, will remain available. So that is simply per tonnage over the weighbridge, but you'll need to bring it there yourself.
Hi, I'm a pensioner and I use hardly anything. So what's going to happen to people like me that don't want to pay for a fortnightly pickup where they'd only have once a month, once every 6 weeks?
Yeah, and I must recognise we heard that a lot in the early engagement and conversation around this. We absolutely get it that not everybody's the same, and it's like many other council services. Not everybody uses it the same. Libraries, public spaces, etc., etc. I absolutely encourage you to put that feedback forward. I know council is open to receiving it, to listen to it. At the end of the day, we have a proposal here that we're going out to consult on, and Jamie and his councillors will pull that together and absolutely have a look at that. But no, noted.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yes, Eric, just a question. Have you looked at any other options apart from curbside collection, for example, waste to energy, even a local waste, rather than sending it through to Nelson? What options have been looked at and what has been the response or data collected? Yeah, so I'll break that question down into two parts. I might deal with the landfill one first and then the waste to energy. So yeah, the question there was around effectively, have we also looked at our own landfill? So that's our own Class 1 municipal landfill to the new code right here in the Buller to receive our waste. And in short, yes, strategically, Council has been looking at what is not an insignificant challenge, which is waste for a remote community of a low population base. And with the requirements around having a landfill that meets today's requirements, having ever increased, it just continues to be a challenge. We currently, going at it alone, can't afford a landfill here in the Buller. It is worth noting that Council has looked at a variety of options, even to the extent of acquiring some land in tenure. Some of you may know the Caroline Terrace site, for example. But at the moment, it's just, it's not something that's attainable for a council of this size. And our problem is not just Buller's problem. It's very representative right across the nation. So Northland, Opotiki, East Coast Hawke's Bay, places in Southland. So we're starting to see within the sector councils working smarter and looking to see how they can combine forces to overcome these perennial issues around, landfill management and landfill access. I might deal with the second part of your question too, which is around incineration or waste to energy. Many of you that have been around will know that there was a variety of proposals that came to the West Coast, both the Buller, Hokitika, Westland, and now in around that Waimate sector, which is effectively private industry looking for waste to energy type of solutions. They have run their journey here in the Bulla and again in Westland. Quite differing and perhaps polar opinions within the community as well about the appropriateness of the waste to energy proposals that were being put forward. And certainly, waste management around New Zealand continues to be an issue. Landfilling is a component of our solution, but it's also being highly discouraged by government. And so many of you will know that the current waste levies have ever been increasing, and that's been a monetary penal way or penalty way to try and divert communities from just relying on landfill approach.
Eric, some of the dialogue I've seen talks about combining forces with other councils on the coast, and I am thinking particularly of where do Grey take their rubbish to, and if that's closer to here than Nelson and we're able to combine with them, surely that makes more sense. And also in terms of collection, I would suggest that a truck from Greymouth to Reefton is a damn sight closer than a truck from here to Reefton to take the rubbish. And maybe, I would encourage that there should be a lot more thought given to that kind of consolidation of effort.
Yeah, I guess, yes, noted. So we currently do have the outer reaches of our district nestle up to the outer reaches of other districts. So classic examples, or a great example, is Punakaiki, where we collect waste up to the true right of the Punakaiki River, and Grey DC collect waste up to the true left of the Punakaiki River. In other places, Ikumatua and down the Grey Valley, where we do the same. So the conversations about trying to find solutions to waste challenges is something that Council has effectively been looking at. They have got a workshop again in October of this year that will look at the potential support and challenges around a more collaborative approach. But certainly Grey DC and Westland DC at the moment are blessed with their own Class 1 landfill. Grey's is at Maclean's, and Westland's at a place called Butler, which is halfway between Hokitika and Ross.
Hi, Eric. My question is really around fly tipping and the practices around fly tipping. And I wonder, does council play an active role in going and collecting the waste that has been fly tipped around the district? And if so, and your proposal suggests that we may see a reduction in fly tipping behaviour, there's actually opportunity for increased efficiencies and then actually a reduction in cost to the ratepayer overall. Is that a fair assumption, or am I kind of making leaps of faith?
No, it's a very fair assumption. I mean, it just needs to... It's easy to understand that fly tipping costs us all. Ultimately someone picks up the bill, and whether that's cleaning up North Beach or whether that is the council bins down the main road, getting filled up in the evenings, that all comes at a cost that ultimately comes back to ratepayers. Bulla District Council has got a share to play in that. The Department of Conservation as well, with significant land holdings, is often the person or the entity left over to pick up fly tipping. But largely within BDC, it is an issue. The other challenges with fly tipping is that under the Litter Act, which is now quite dated, I think from 1956, it's incredibly difficult for our compliance teams to stay on top of these remote places where people decide to fly tip. And finally, the sad thing is often I see fly tipping of material and refuse that actually really could have been recycled so easily if the service was available to someone.
Yes, my question is, or maybe it's a comment, I hope if you do go mandatory on the bins, I hope your idea of the recycling, going down works, but excuse me. But what I can see, and people that I've spoken to, mainly pensioners like myself, they are determined that if they're going to have to pay for a bin, a mandatory bin, they're going to use that bin to its extent, and they're going to fill that bin up every fortnight when it goes. Now, my comment is that with the increased rubbish that's going to landfill, somebody's going to have to pay for that, so the landfill prices go up to Buller District Council, and then it comes back to the ratepayer. We pay the extra. So what's your comments and thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying. It's a volumetric equation. If it's available, as you say, it's human nature to perhaps maximise that. I would say we've worked a lot with other councils that have had bins in their network for some considerable amount of time. Take Christchurch, for example, or other places. And people do tend to get into a steady state of actually using the service, just in relation to refuse. It's also worth noting that in the future, there's legislative change coming that will carve off things such as food waste and potential green waste. So be aware that the current government priority setting and direction is actually about providing at consumer or at producer split waste services. So even Buller at some point, and maybe even Reefton and Westport, will need to look at actually making these other services available. They're currently indicating by 2030 for food waste and the like. Now, in relation to volumetric charges or the volumetric amount available in bins, I would love your feedback, and certainly we've received a lot of it to date. Some other councils have decided or have gone with slightly smaller bins, like let's say 80 litres on a fortnightly collection. Some have even perhaps gone for 120 on a take a collection, miss a collection. And others have utilised new technology that's in the industry now with the trucks and the RFID tagging. So there's basically data acquisition on a lift-as-you-go type of approach. So all of those opportunities and all of those things are well understood and considered across New Zealand.
That was the question.
I was going to ask you, but you answered it then, but why don't we go to the pay-as-you-use? Which has worked before when we had blue bins and green bins. We paid when it was picked up. You do the same with these. With technology these days, it should be real simple.
Yeah. Yep. So so please put that forward in, like in all your submissions and engagement. It's not without its own challenges. So certainly it does make it more difficult for contractors, particularly at tender time, to make informed decisions as to the type of volumetric material that they'll be dealing with. But there are certainly advantages, as you've pointed out.
Hi, Eric. Further to that, are you wanting people to give their opinion on this scheme itself and give suggestions of other ideas as well? So when we're doing public consultation, and a lot of people don't like this, would it be helpful for council to hear what other ideas individuals have and what they'd like to see?
Council always stands open, to hearing ideas. So, the answer is an affirmative yes. And on your way out here, there are some proposal documents and consultation documents. And, folk will note that there's actually quite a big section that, asks for wider opinions and feedback.
Yeah, hi Eric. Currently in the York Valley landfill, it costs about $230 a tonne to deposit there, and we are currently paying about $500 and something for our dumping there. So you talked about creating landfills here, and the cost was prohibitive, creating a landfill here in Westport or other areas. We have up there Stockton Mine that takes out 4,500 tonne of coal every day, and they have to reconstitute the land back or whatever, but of course they can't do that volumetrically. So but they've taken off the overburden and bits and pieces and they put it back afterwards, but it's never going to be at the same level that it was before. The same thing applies out at Okari, where the mineral sands has been established there. If we took out the bio waste and had that collected separately, then couldn't that be mixed with the overburden and that could be a partial landfill here within Westport?
Yeah, so if I'm grabbing the question right, if I'm picking up what you're putting down, you mean the pit in Stockton, if we, took out the food and the bio waste, we turn that into a landfill?
No, I'm not talking about landfill, I'm talking about bio waste.
Right.
Because we're basically composting it in with the overburden when it's put back in.
Perfect. Okay. So on the first element, obviously it stands to reason that actually, having some sort of landfilling there would be challenging. But on the other element, which is the bio waste, and particularly the changes in the government direction about bringing out food waste as a collection service by 2030, at the moment they are indicating it'll be for populations of 1,000 or more. So that absolutely is Westport, and just on the cusp of Reefton, depending on the population numbers there at any one time. But if that were to roll out, the team have already started to engage with Stockton and particularly the team within BT Mining and the environmental team to look at actual real collaborative approaches to deal with our food waste and that, directed waste out of the waste stream here locally.
Why isn't that included in your plan and in your proposal? Why don't you tell us that?
Yeah, Good point. So currently the food collection needs to be in place by 2030. And yeah. 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 And that's the government direction at the moment. Certainly a lot of councils around New Zealand are naturally biding their time a little bit through this calendar year just to see how government policy and direction shapes up in subsequent years, particularly after October. It's some bigger cities have already started to collect food waste as a separate waste stream, and some of the smaller councils are just trying to work out what some of the financial impact of that will be. Splitting out our food waste will be another significant challenge around affordability for the smaller communities. Tooling up another set of trucks, tooling up composting processes, and so forth. But certainly the conversation has started with Stockton and the BT staff to see if we could have a good arrangement there in the future.
Eric, I lived in Auckland before I came here for my sins. I was there for the money, not because I'm an Aucklander, because I'm not. What we had up there was an inorganic collection every other year, and there was also a strong component, and not just there but in other places, of a recycling centre which took stuff that was reusable, and there's currently nothing like that going on here, and we're certainly big enough for it. What effort has been put into incorporating that idea into the new waste management proposals?
Yeah, so just for the benefit of the crowd, inorganic collections, so that is perhaps once every 6 months or every year. There's a big drive around the town to pick up things like fridges and bed frames and, all that sort of major stuff. And you do see that happen all over the world, in Australia, New Zealand and Europe, where that is quite a thing. We haven't made that move here yet, quite simply because we're asking our residents to take that to the RTS. We will accept that. Now to your second point, which is around actual reduce, reuse, recycle, and that is effectively the dump shop, like a recycling centre. That does obviously have some merit. So all over New Zealand there is community groups or waste buster groups, or in some places like Nelson, Christchurch, slightly larger centres, they actually have got some really, really nice recycling shops that people really enjoy going to in their weekends. Some of our coast councils have moved into this space. Hokitika in particular have got really quite a nice one. In Karamea, we've got a particularly
engaged community group called the Karamea Waste Management Group, and we're currently working with them to set up a resource recovery recycling centre, really as part of our waste minimisation strategy going forward and as part of our LTP plan submissions with Council. That's absolutely something we can discuss going forward for Westport and Reefton as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, look, I just want to ask you about the current bin we've got with the yellow lid. That's retained. Well, that was retained.
Yes.
I have never brought a rubbish bag. I've never had to. If I've had any rubbish, I handle that myself by taking it to the tip. But now you're telling me that you're going to make me pay for something that's replacing something I've never used. And I'll be happy about it. You know, I like everyone else can read, and I read newspapers. I know what's going on mostly around town. I'm getting this feeling I'm a bit of a cash cow rather than getting some benefit out of it. Because you're going to give me something I don't want. So I'm taking this opportunity to tell you I don't want it. If you were to bring in a bin and I paid to have it tipped when it's full and not on a weekly basis, maybe. But I'm not very happy about another cost. I'm paying almost $80 a week out of my pension to live in Westport. I don't have any bus service. I don't have much at all really that the council supplies that's visible. So if you're asking for a vote on it, I'm saying no, I don't want it. All right? Thanks.
Same. Just in case. Yeah.
I've never brought one.
In Nelson, 4 for $10.
And in Blenheim, they give it to the ratepayers.
People hardly use them, so you haven't got the guy that is taking to dump his rubbish there out there and avoiding having to actually buy one in the first place. And all you're basically going to do is lift the size of the yellow bin that's perfectly adequate for most people in town. I don't have any problem with the current system. I don't buy a black bin. They're too expensive. You're supposed to be getting rid of plastic.
Yeah.
So you're getting rid of the black bin, the black rubbish bag, sorry, you're getting rid of that and giving us a bigger yellow bin. To what purpose?
Yeah. So, okay. So, yeah, I may just do a little bit of myth busting there. So, the yellow recycling bin, which is a 240 litre bin, will stay. Okay. So, the recycling bin and the glass crate service, yeah, will absolutely stay the way it is. It currently already has universal charging right across our district. So everybody that's in Zone 1 is on the route is involved in that. So there's no changes proposed in this proposal to the yellow recycling bin. The change proposed is to go from a 60 litre rubbish bag with a weekly collection routing through to a 120 litre wheelie bin, lid colour to be determined, on a fortnightly collection routing.
It's an extra bin. It's an extra bin, and we haven't needed an extra bin, what I can see. And yet we've got a black rubbish bag that you want to dispose of now, nobody's buying them. So you dispose of that and you add on another bin. As I said, what is the purpose of that?
Yes.
It benefits us, the community.
Yeah, so a refuse collection service across our community is something that councils do. They do that all over New Zealand. It is certainly part of our legislative mandate.
I'm talking about what you're planning to provide, and I'm saying we don't need it.
Can I just say some of us do, and some of us do support it, so I would just appreciate you don't say that you speak for the whole of the community.
No, community is one word, not community group.
I'm just pointing out, you can't speak for everyone in the community.
I'm not, I'm having my
Tommy.
But just carry on with the questions. So this lady would like to talk.
There you go.
Yeah, hi, I do recycling of all sorts, rubbish, recycling and composting. That's food scraps, because I also have chooks. Not everyone does.
No.
But the recycling part. Say you buy 6 items in the supermarket and they're all in plastic. Could be yogurt, whatever, meat. You don't get a choice of what your product is on or in. You get it home, you wash it, you look at it, and you go, oh, those 3 things have to go in the rubbish bin, because on the form thing or the numbers, this is an example because I can't remember off the top of my head. 1, 3, and 6. Those 3 things are only recyclable. The other 3 things on my bench have to go in the rubbish. I don't have a choice where they go. So this is probably a government thing now, but who decides what our food is packed in the supermarket? You go and buy your steak. You don't get a choice. It's on a bloody plastic tray that has to go in the rubbish.
Yeah. So
thank you, and I wash it all too.
Well, thank you very much for that. So certainly, just quickly, just answer that. Pardon me, because you know it does remain a challenge for New Zealand to have food packaging that's appropriate, to have you know, government initiatives that actually reduce producers of waste. Some of you that have seen where the Ministry for the Environment's going here, they're really trying to turn the tables back on initial producers to make wise choices. So some of you might have seen the single-use plastic items going out. There was conversations before the last or towards the last election of the container return scheme, CSD. So that's where, you know, plastic cans, drink cans have some extra couple of cents on them so that they return back and they get recycled. In our current recycling network, we can accept plastics 1, 2, and 5. The other plastics, particularly soft plastics, are unable to be recycled, and that is effectively the way the sector has gone recently, for the last 10 years, more than a decade, that the soft plastics just quite simply don't have a market. So councils that are charged with providing appropriate collection services to their communities universally do still need a bin or a bag for refuse collection for all the things that can't go in the recycling bin. Diverting anything to your compost is fantastic.
Thank you. Well, I'm thoroughly disgusted. I think this is just an attempt to get money for nothing. That's all it is. In that you're saying that the fly tipping around this area is being produced by people that have little rubbish at the gate. You seem to have no regard for the fact that some houses only have 1 living in and therefore produce a lot less rubbish than those that have more than 1 living in the household. So you're intending a scheme that would see a pensioner, a superannuant living on their own, pay the same as a family of 5 or 6. And it is totally wrong, and it is also against your own policy. At a September meeting in 2004, after many trips up and down the Coast Road communicating with your compatriots, Buller District Council formed a policy to say no mandatory charges. I know of no time when they've actually agreed to do the opposite. They've also said to reduce rubbish. So to pay people to have an empty bin, they're going to put something in it. In my case, it'll probably just be rocks. This is a sham, and so is your recycling, where you extract money off the ratepayers for the more expensive recycling. People have put electronic trackers in them, and it shows it going to Nelson landfill. If that was a private company, it'd be called fraudulent. Okay, you were charging people for dumping. I'd like to know where this scheme originated from, because it's not clear. We've had the mayor say people came into his office wanting wheelie bins. Well, if we got a full consultation over a small number of people, I can think of a whole lot more consultations we need over a lot more important issues than this. You want money for nothing, and it could well be got around in that at the moment the bag is a tag, and you've inflated the cost of that over several years. I wrote to council last year when you increased it, asking what percentage costs had gone up to council to justify your increase in the cost of the bag. And your staff couldn't understand that. I didn't get a reply. Should have got one within 20 working days. Now we've had another $2 increase, out of proportion to any increase in cost, just to try and sway this argument for wheelie bins, because that's what you want, because you intend to price gouge people who do not use the rubbish collection. They store it up, they find it cheaper to take it to the dump themselves than at the gate. We also need to be resilient. We're looking at a magnitude 8 movement of the Alpine Fault. What are you going to do with your rubbish when it's in a bin and you can't take it to Nelson? If it's in a bag, people can store a number of bags on their property. You can collect your bags up and take it to the transfer station and put enough rodent bait around it, and it won't be a health hazard. But if the road to Nelson is locked out for a number of weeks, months, it's even suggested, where's their rubbish going to go? Your bin's full, you haven't got anywhere else to put it, you haven't got any bags on hand because we don't have any bags anymore. If you really didn't want to get money for nothing, it would be very easy for you to buy a tag to put on your wheelie bin, and that way, whoever picks the bin up takes the tag off and you buy another tag. So it's user pays, which agrees with the own policy that you adopted in 2004.
So, yeah, well, there's certainly a number of questions in that. And suffice to say, appreciate feedback and input. Put it into your submission, please.
I think we came here for consultation, and I agree with exactly what Paul's saying. We've come here with one idea, one concept put out there, that it was going to be, from what I can see, forced down our throat. We as pensioners, a lot of superannuants here in this district, are paying, at the moment we're paying the equivalent of 80, 90, 100 bucks a year for garbage collection or rubbish collection. But now all of a sudden, as Paul indicated, we're now going to be shoved down our throat, and that's 250 or give or take, whatever the numbers work out. And yet we're going to be subsidising families within the district. Simple RFID tag included in a bin or a tag, so when you use it, you pay for it. And I'm telling you now, 120 litres will last me 4 months, 5 months, easy. So I'm going to be paying twice a year rather than, $250 a year. I think you've got to start to go back to square one and think outside the box. There's lots that can be done, and there's lots of opportunities.
Sorry, Mr. Reynolds. Oh, no, I was just going to be fair to you. You may wish to have the microphone.
We can't accept it unless we know what the cost is.
Right.
You've deliberately not told us because you say to put it to 10 will be too hard.
Oh,
No,
okay.
not to put to 10. It could have been put to 10. You could have been telling us tonight what it's going to cost, but you've deliberately not, because all you want to do is gouge ratepayers' money.
Yeah. So just for the benefit of the live feed, because the question giver didn't have the microphone, so it really was a question around. Council doesn't know the cost because it hasn't gone to tender, and it says it won't go to tender.
You could have put it to 10.
Yeah.
You would have the tenders in, you would have been able to say this is what's going to cost. You deliberately did not do that. So we don't know. So you hope to get people to accept it. So you charge them something they do not need, and they're paying something you get money for nothing.
Yes, I'm quite happy to answer the question. Certainly the tender stage is set for early 2025. The process we're going through now is engaging with our community about what level of service they would like to see go out there. And so that is what Council has set and embarked upon. So by Monday the 4th of September, please have your input so that Council can decide what services it would like to price and tender. And I'd just like to remind people as well that as we go through early 2024, as we go through calendar year 2024, Council will engage through LTPs, that's long-term planning processes, 2024 through to 2034, where some of those costs will be known. Yep.
I just wanted to respond to a comment a gentleman at the back said, just talking about pensioners subsidising families. And I just wanted to point out that, you know, those of us who are still working actually subsidise healthcare for people not working. So the whole idea of a community is that we support each other, and sometimes younger people subsidise older people, and sometimes older people subsidise younger people, and that is what a society does.
It's certainly, while Mira is going out the back to grab a few more questions, particularly perhaps from Annalise, and we'll take a few more. But just again, you know, just to reiterate that council has recognised and heard the feedback to date that not everybody produces the same, and that's come through really nice and clear. I'd encourage everybody, you know, whether they see merit in this proposal or not, to just please use the consultation processes that we've made available.
Take this. So 1, 2, 3.
I just further to what Mr. Reynolds was saying about the charge of the bags going up. I just wanted to clarify for everyone's benefit, because it wasn't clear to me before I was a councillor. The current setup is that we have a contractor, Smart Environmental, and so they are a contractor. They look after all of our rubbish for us. They dictate the price of the bags and how much they cost people to buy. So once we choose them as a contractor, we actually have no say in what they charge. So the charge increase has come from Smart Environmental themselves, and the council don't have a control over that. And so that's something we need to be mindful of, whatever we decide going forward. Is that if this is not the plan, that's fine, but we will likely have to get a contractor or come up with another plan ourselves. And if we choose a contractor, that may be a problem in the future too, is that they may decide, well, actually, the levies have gone up, we need to increase the prices, and that's not within our control. So unless we have our own company or CCO that is looking after the rubbish themselves, it will be out of our control. So I just wanted to clarify, Eric, because some people don't know where the cost of the plastic bags come from, but that's the contractor in that case.
Yeah, so as we move forward, and particularly with this, you know, opportunity to re-tender a contract that was struck in February 2014 and will effectively come to an end soon, I mean, there's a real opportunity here to actually get efficiencies of scale, to also get appropriate type of equipment across our network, and for council to consider about, you know, ownership of particular waste streams. So think recycling, and have more of a control element on the pricing charges. Now, currently, as of right now, a bag is $9.10, includes GST, and I believe the weighbridge charge is $5.03. So it's north of $500 per tonne across at the RTS. Now, those elements are effectively made up, and down here I got it in the notes, and the exact percentage. As a matter of fact, I think it may even be online in the consultation document. Approximately 50 or 53% of that is actually the gate charge at York Valley, which is forecast to rise again, and particularly around the ETS, the emission trading schemes charges, and the waste levy, which is in effect discouraging disposal to landfill. The remainder of it, at about a quarter or just over, is transport. Stands to reason it's an incredibly long way for us to transport our refuse. If we continue to go at it alone, just in the Buller, we'll be wed to York Valley, and that's an incredibly long way to transport. We've had the good support of local cartridge operators, and some of those things are changing as well. And then certainly finally there's some handling and other charges. So that really is a component breakdown of the charges that we currently have. We are, by some token, directed by the market forces around that.
Hi again. When do you propose to start charging people for wheelie bins?
Yeah, so well, there's still a few decision elements to be made before we're there, of course. Right now we're in the middle of an open consultation process. As I said before, that closes on Monday the 4th of September, and I'd encourage everyone to be involved. As Jamie outlined just at the top of the hour when we started, there are then some key significant date for our council team to be stepping through with councillors and governance decision makers about what the approach is going to be on service level. That will then be priced and tendered. There'll be some mobilisation around that, and ultimately looking at some point in mid-2025 onwards.
Now, with all the calculations on things, you already know what tonnage is going to Nelson. So really from that, a tenderer can estimate what cost. But back to somebody else's statement about people paying for something they're not using, you'll collect all the money as the council, not Smart Environment. So Smart Environment perhaps charges you $200 per household and you're taking $300 per household. Is the money going to come back to the people?
Yes, well, so I mean, council has a variety of way of, charging in rate strikes, and in some cases it does hold rates in its own account to then go and provide services. So I think water, stormwater, etc. around the district. Also things such as library services. Effectively, we don't know whether it's going to be Smart Environmental. It may actually be another contractor. What we do know is that large New Zealand-based municipal waste contractors look for big number contracts. So, if we can make a service that is consistent across New Zealand and perhaps looks at, because we only have 5,200 bins in our network, we look at actually making a meaningful tenderable opportunity, we'll get some real good traction and tension and pricing. But ultimately, it may not be Smart Environmental that actually becomes our contractor going forward.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm talking on the mathematics of it. So say we've got 500 tonnes that goes up to Nelson every year, and there's 100 households, we all pay a hundredth of the cost for that. But if some households don't, how can I... If you can see that somehow that you're getting more money on your calculation than what is actually...
Yeah, so certainly the aspect of the universal charge across Zone 1, which sees this as part of rates, would see it come into council accounts for rates.
Will it be ring-fenced solely for rubbish?
Yes, I would say yes. It's a matter for governance, but yes. And to some extent, I touched earlier on some of our stormwater and drinking water supplies. That's exactly how they are handled. So they're for the benefit of the contributors.
Yeah, hi Eric. I've got concerns about the consultation process. 18 months ago, 22nd of February last year, we had a community meeting, a public meeting here in town. 3 people wanted walls around Westport. 3 out of 60. Okay, here we are now, we've got a number of people in this room. You can see the mood. I did a forum on a Facebook site earlier this week, a community Facebook site. 90% don't want the bins. 90% don't want mandatory bins. The mood, you know the mood, you can see it here. People don't want the rubbish bags, for those various reasons. They don't like paying $9 at a supermarket to buy a bag. We also have pensioners, people like myself. I'm $300 a year worse off with this proposal. Am I happy? Of course I'm not happy. So we're going to come to a compromise. We need the bins. We need the bins at an affordable price, and we need something that works for the town. It's going to be user pays with the bins. Okay? That's what the submissions are going to tell you. So that's what you need to be working towards. Okay? I look at the room here now. I know if I ask for a show of hands, we're going to see 90% don't want mandatory bins. You know that. Let's do it. Who wants mandatory bins? Oh, sorry. Who wants mandatory bins? Where's your 10%? They don't exist. They don't exist on Facebook. They don't exist in this room. They don't exist in the community. Okay? That's what your submission process is going to tell you. You people need to sit down and come up with a plan that the community wants. We don't want phony submissions. We don't want jacked up submissions. Okay, we saw that with the walls. We're still fighting that. The walls are going to cost the ratepayers of this territory, this area, $500, $1,000, $1,500 a year extra. You're talking $300 a year extra. We've got insurances. Are we concerned about the rates of this region? You know, we're not the lowest rate base, we're the rate payers in the country by any means. We pay a lot for rates. With the flood protection, we're going to pay a lot more. With the bin proposal, I'm paying 10% more on top of my current rates. Where is this going to stop? Okay? The rates for rubbish are just one concern we have, but we need a scheme that is affordable for the people, and you're the guys that need to come up with it. Sorry about this.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit as before, there's a lot of questions in there to unpack. Really welcome all feedback, and please put that forward.
Right.
Shall I just, I mean, to be fair to everybody that's made the time to be here, shall I just take a few more questions? And I mean, I'm happy to also get some other people to share some thoughts, but effectively I'll take a few more questions from the room, quite happy to, and then we might see if we can wrap it up. Yeah, so just to repeat that for the benefit of the live feed, commercial versus domestic, and how does that fit into this proposal? So this proposal here is based on Zone 1, residential, normal bin collection. It does stand to reason that any community has got some commercial waste producers. They could be large building yards, supermarkets, you name it, and they primarily have their own contracts in place for some of their waste disposal and even some of their recycling disposal, like flat cardboard and the likes. The focus of this proposal is on Zone 1 residential collections. So there may be some commercial premises, for example, small, a furniture store, or someone down our high street in Reefton or Westport. They currently have a yellow-topped recycling bin and a single glass crate, and in those cases, they will be serviced with a 120-litre refuse bin to stop them having to buy plastic bags.
Yeah, hi Eric. Currently we're dumping at the York Valley fill. What is the time limit on that? What sort of contract do Buller have with Nelson and Tasman district councils? How long can we keep on doing that? Do the people of Nelson know that we're filling up their landfill and that we are reducing the life for the people of Nelson? That's really got to be taken into consideration. All of us here are looking for a reduction in the cost. And by going through what I talked about before, the food waste, the biodegradable and landfills, we could actually experience a reduction in our waste costs. And that's something that you and the council need to be putting a huge amount of effort in and make it happen. Don't wait for the bloody government. We've got to go ahead and have a strong council that is willing to push these things ahead ourselves. We're looking for a reduction in cost, not more.
Yeah, so just quickly talking about York Valley. So York Valley Landfill is a collaborative business unit between Nelson City and Tasman District. Yeah, they're so close together. Well, just for the benefit of people that don't know. So Nelson City and Tasman are so close together, they've gone together. The actual commercial business unit of, York Valley Landfilling, we liaise with quite closely. To date, they've been comfortable. But certainly, access to other landfills in other places, remains a risky proposition going forward. But then again, that's balanced against, and I said it earlier at the top of the hour, about a community of our size still being faced with some significant challenges around affordability of our own landfill. Have noted, absolutely do note, your suggestions and wider government suggestions about further reductions of waste streams, particularly compost and food waste, and they all come with their own complexities and costs as well. Yep. Mr. Reedy, and yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Colin Reedy. I'm in a bit of a quandary here, of course. I'm here as a pensioner. I'm here as a member of the community, and obviously I'm a councillor, so I'm going to be very careful how and what I say. When we look around the room, there's a majority of pensioners here who are obviously concerned about an increase in their costs. Now, for me personally, when I look at page 8 of your paper that went out, other alternatives considered for rubbish collection, rely on private contractor or private sector services for household rubbish collection, keeps on going. This service is a similar price to the cost of using one rubbish bag each week and significantly higher than the anticipated cost of a council provided service. Well, okay, so I use a 120 bin from Smart Environmental. That lasts me for about 6 weeks. Now, with the recent increase, let's round dollars, that's $20. So I'm looking at around about $240 a year. You're looking at potentially increasing that by 50, even 75%. And I have to wonder why. Reduce, recycle, reuse, and yet here I am undertaking that function, but you are more or less mandating that I'm going to require a bigger bin that's going to have to be collected every 2 weeks, not every 6 weeks, which I choose to pay for. Now, the other thing that's come to mind for me is and you mentioned it before, Eric, was the waste levy, and we know that keeps on going up each time, and that's a burden that we have to pass on to the ratepayer or the user. However, as we know with the Waste Management Act, I think it's called 2008, the levy is 50% refunded back to the territorial authority, provided they have a WMMP, i.e. a Waste Management and Minimisation Plan. Now that 50% comes back to the district council, and supposedly it is expected to be spent on, if you like, waste management education. Now, I've raised the question I've got is how is that at the moment being used, and can it be used for what we're talking about now in terms of waste minimisation, instead of having this particular piece of paper, this plan to actually increase. You're asking me to increase my waste because I'm having to pay upwards of $400 for a year plus for a fortnightly rubbish collection.
Yeah, and so I'll just try and just unpackage that, and I'll just answer that in a chronological order. So the first thing is just quickly around the consultation document. It talked about a private service provider that was calculated on a fortnightly basis, so the same as the proposal. As I mentioned earlier, council does recognise that everybody produces different amounts of waste, and in your particular case, it sounds like you can go 6 weeks with one of those bins. Now, around the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan, WMMP, it is a legislative requirement to have that. All West Coast councils do. We're currently in our 2018 to 2024 WMMP, and we are engaging across all councils in a joint conversation approach about setting strategic direction for WMMP 24 to 28. The Waste Services Levy, or the landfill levy you touched on, Councillor Reedy, is absolutely correct. It has effectively been raised and raised and raised again in each and every year that it's been in effect, and it is quite effective in re-educating communities to use landfilling as effectively driving up the price. That is a significant issue for the more remote communities around New Zealand and communities like ours. So the Ministry for Environment give back 50% of that levy to councils to use for waste minimisation and management initiatives. The other 50% goes into a contestable pool.
And I must say, we've done rather well out of that ourselves lately as well. So all three councils worked together to make a bid into that pool for a figure just under $1 million to set up a construction and demolition waste project across the West Coast. So not only does Buller get some of the waste levy back, 50% on a pro rata basis, but it also becomes eligible to put forward smart business cases and investment decisions that help us manage our waste better into the future. I might just make this the last one and deal with the last slide.
I'll be quick, Eric.
Yeah.
Just a couple this time. The initial supply of the bins. I think you said there's about 5,000 yellow bins in circulation in the area at the moment. So I'm guessing we're talking a similar number for the proposed bins, 5,000?
Yes, correct. So, I mean, while my grey matter doesn't serve me as well as what it once did, I think it's 5,240 bins, and we have about 5,100 or just over 5,100 contributors within Zone 1.
Okay. So who's going to be paying for the initial supply of those bins?
Yeah, and it was picked up as well, and we certainly heard that feedback. So unlike the yellow bins, which we got in 2014, we were able to bulk purchase them and pay them off through some of the waste levy funding that we got back because it was around recycling initiatives. Certainly these bins would be paid back as part of the rate service in the universal charge over time. A bin unit is approximately $85 to $90 each for the 120 litre. The 240 is slightly more expensive, so you'd be looking at $9 a year over a 10-year life of the contract.
Okay, thanks. And my last question won't be so easy. We're seeing a job advertised at the council. Why would that be? Why would we be asking for a 6 months contract for someone to administer a scheme that we haven't decided upon yet?
Yeah, so it's more than just So thank you, and a good plug to know that we're actually recruiting for good local talent. But it's more just about administering this scheme. It's certainly about administering the engagement with our communities, working with our councillors to try and frame up, a smart way forward, and also about bigger procurement and supplier selection around our contract and re-tendering. So, really looking for someone with some good project management skills within the waste sector. So, team, I may just draw your attention to this last slide as Jamie joins me for some closing comments, and that really is just about how can people provide feedback going forward. So, the 4th of September is the date we're working towards. Please hop on our website, pop in to have a read on the proposal. They're in a variety of locations through to our community centres, and submissions can be made online. And any final inquiries that you may have after thinking about this evening, please get them through to our info@BDC email address with the subject Waste Management 2025, and that will land in the right spot. Okay. Yeah. So, yes, I'll certainly get our staff to just check the technology there. It's the first time I've heard that feedback, to be fair, so everybody else seems to be getting in. So let's just make sure that, it isn't an isolated incident. But we also have the Connect newsletter that's coming into a lot of mailboxes at the moment that has got a set of submissions forms in it. There's some hard copies on the door on the way out, so please do grab one. Well, certainly, and that's for our council and governance members to decide. So I'll take this opportunity to just genuinely thank every one of you to be here tonight, and I'll hand the... Well, again, that's for our governance members to decide. I'll closing comments. I really thank you for coming here, and I'll give the final word to Jamie Cleine. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Lots of good information and lots of good questions as well. So there's nothing tonight that I haven't heard from other people. So you're not alone in your concerns. They're being heard. I guess what I would say is there's lots and lots of ways to change the service, and they all have different costs and different practicalities around how they could be done or not done. And so there's no reason why some of the suggestions tonight can't be considered, but they may or may not have additional costs. They might be cheaper. They might be cheaper for some or more expensive for others. So all of these things are what council hopes to get out of the feedback, and then we have to decide what we do. So what we know, in answer to Mr. Reynolds' question around majority or not, there's likely to be a whole raft of suggestions and options. What we know is the current system is coming to the end of its contract. We know that a lot of people don't like the bags. We know that they're not going to get any cheaper, and that we know that we want to explore all options to make it more sustainable and as affordable as we can for the majority of people. And that doesn't mean that everyone will think the same. There'll be some people that it's more expensive for, and there'll be other people that it's cheaper for. Yeah, and so it's a complicated, it's not easy, these sort of things. And so that's the idea of this process. We have to start somewhere, and we don't know the price till you tender it. The more you play around with the options around what bin gets picked up on any given week, obviously it's complication and potentially cost to a contractor who's trying to price up what street he's going down and how many bins he might be picking up that week. All of those things are all doable, but they all have implications for any contract going forward. So look forward to your feedback, and like I said before, councillors are listening and available to hear from you directly as well. So thank you very much for coming out. And we'll also hang around now if there's anyone that was too shy to ask a question on the mic to ask a question to us directly. Thank you very much.